All right, welcome to Super Team Fantasy Football, Episode 5. I am your commissioner and your host, Brandon DeFreitas. Trying something new, as you might have noticed today, a little YouTube live. It's going to be choppy. There's not going to be any editing, but, late here on a Friday, and some of you are still at work. I didn't want to go through the whole processing deal, going through iMovie and all that editing. So I figured we'd just bring it straight to you live and wing it. Hopefully you guys enjoy the weekend. Looks like it's nice weather out there. We have a nice little show prepared for you. We're going to talk some matchup reviews, then go into some transaction review, followed by some matchup previews, and finally some season-long takes. And of course, we're going to be talking whether or not, how far is Mark DeMello going to go on this epic run of his. But let's start it off with a little matchup review. And the biggest thing everyone wants us to address, of course, wants me to address, is my loss to Kenny. My team fell to 2-6 after the half championship, as Edwin likes to call it, with John last year. Definitely a disappointing start to the season for me. With 6 losses, it really seems in these leagues we play, there are no divisions. Top 6 teams make it. So that's half the league. You got to come in at 500 or a little above 500. That's what I would imagine. And unfortunately for me, that I can only afford one more loss before I'm below 500. 5 games to go. Can I go on a Mark type run? I'm gonna have to if I want to slip into the playoffs. We'll see if it happens. But certainly a big time loss to the team that last week on the power rankings we ranked as the consensus worst team in the league. And Kenny, and I go out in a must win. I mean, if I win that game, I'm 3-5. I'm on the outside looking in, but I'm not looking terrible. Now I got to pull a miracle in order to make the playoffs. So definitely, I think one of the more disappointing losses of the entire season so far in our league, and I'm the one who pulls it through. Congrats to me. Another big thing to review from last week: Mark moved to 8-0. He beat Chris. Chris is now a 2-6 team as well. Mark's just a total juggernaut, and that Patriots defense just continues to put up 20-plus points in every game. It's hard to imagine it continuing with the schedule coming up, but we've been saying this all year, and it hasn't really changed for Mark at all. It's just straight been domination from his defense, and you combine that with Aaron Jones, who we threw some shade on as Mark's bust, and man, we couldn't have been more wrong on that. And I think I doubled down on episode 2 and said, yeah, I mean, this certainly wasn't a bust anymore, but he'll be disappointing going forward. No. He's having like a Christian McCaffrey-esque season right now. I guess you wonder, and you know what? I'm not even going to go there. I was going to say you wonder what's going to happen when Davante Adams comes back, but I don't want to add any more gasoline to Mark's season and help him improve. The bottom line with Mark is, look, he's 8-0. He's guaranteed a playoff spot. He's probably looking at a first-round bye, and from there, he's only going to need to win 2 games in a row in the playoffs. And the way his season's going, that's a piece of cake. So definitely the favorite to win so far. Will Tam also went out and had a key 6-2 win over Travers. Will Travers was in that playoff hunt, still is, but that loss is not going to help out his playoff chances one bit. And it's like it's funny. This whole week was kind of, you had my disappointing loss, but then you have Mark and Tam just continuing to dominate and put people back, and maybe that gives me a chance to sneak in here. I'm pulling up the standings right now to take a look, but yeah, I mean, Tam's 6-2, Mark's 8-0, bunch of 4-4 teams. I mean, Travers is now on the outside looking in at 4-4 in the 7 seed. So I guess the 6 seed with Edwin is 4-4, meaning that myself at 2-6, only 2 games back. It is still possible, but you can't lose to Kenny. You just can't. I feel like I don't even belong in the league anymore after that. Sorry to say that to Kenny. He was a great guy, but definitely not a great fantasy owner, and at least in this league has not shown the ability. Some other highlights from last week: Crawford beat Marco. This was a swing game. Crawford's now 5-3. Marco's 3-5. This is one of those where they both would have ended up 500 if Marco had won. But instead, Crawford went out, took the victory, took care of business, and now, I mean, any team that's above 500 at this point in the season is looking pretty good in our standings with the parity we have. Similar thing over in John's game. John beat Tim. We said this was a swing game for John. Tim was looking a little bit weak without Patrick Mahomes, and the end result is John at 4-4, Tim at 3-5. This is big for John, he's had the most points against all season, and I'm pretty certain that's still the case. I'll double check that. At 4-4, look, it wasn't the start he wanted. He's had some bad luck, and yeah, he is still the most points against in the league, but he's primed in the playoff race right now. He just needs a strong second half of the year, and the points for will help him in any and all tiebreakers looking forward. VJ over Edwin. This was a disappointing result too in the matchups. Edwin was a team that we said had a lot of adversity go against him when he had the Antonio Brown and Kerryon Johnson. Two of his early picks are out, and he did a really good job with his later round picks, as we highlighted in the last episode, in order to kind of improve and keep playing and keep winning, even with those injuries and whatever you want to call Antonio Brown. But, losing to VJ, who VJ's had a great season too. But this was a game where Edwin could have gotten up to 5 wins, could have primed himself for a playoff spot. And instead, he's kind of in that middle pack right now. And he's sitting there in that, I think it was the last playoff spot. Edwin's sitting there. And that's not really where he wants to be at. It's pretty solid considering the adversity. But you look at it, there's 4-4 teams. Behind that, 3-3-5 teams, and then 2-2-6 teams. It's just you're kind of stuck in the middle of the pack. And, at the top of the league, you have the 8-0 from Mark, the 6-2 from Tam, and the 5-3 from Crawford. So, it would have been really nice for Edwin if he could have gotten to that 5-3 record and, primed himself for a playoff position. Instead, a disappointing loss to VJ. Let me pull up some of the points scored, just see if we can highlight some players from last week. But for the most part, I think in terms of the playoff review, what we just did covers it. Going to week 8 here. Yeah, looking at some of the high scores, the high performers in these games. We'll start with my game and Kenny's game. I had some nice performance. I had a good stream start with Ryan Tannehill. Julio Jones got 25. They both ended up with 25. But Kenny didn't really have anyone bust, and he got a good performance from Joe Mixon for the first time all year. Brady with 22. I mean, it really just a pillow fight for the most part at 109-105. Looking at Travers, he only put up 75 points. He was on vacation, and you have to imagine that's part of the reason why he didn't put up his team didn't play to its total capacity, because he was, on vacation. He's, recently engaged, as I am as well. So, he was on this big vacation and putting his focus somewhere else. And the way my fantasy team is going right now, I certainly should have put my focus somewhere else as well. Hey, it looks like we have one person watching live. I appreciate that. Whoever is tuning in won't tell me, apparently. But, feel free to comment. I can reply to any questions, any at all. But going down the list here, yeah, Travers really just didn't manage his team. He's got priorities elsewhere. Good for him. Then you look at the Marco Crawford matchup. Saquon returning for Crawford is really the difference there, whereas Marco, he had Deshaun Watson go off for 33 points. Chris McNamara losing to the juggernaut that is Mark. I mean, look at this. 41 points from Aaron Jones, 27 from Michael Thomas, and 19 from the Patriots defense. Michael Thomas is going to be even better now with Drew Brees out there. I can't believe what Mark's doing at the moment. He's been absolutely fantastic, and hopefully he doesn't go undefeated, but it's hard to rule it out at this point. Looking down further, you have VJ and Edwin's matchup. Edwin just didn't get a performance from Carson Wentz that he expected. He only ended up with 16 points there, whereas VJ got that monster Aaron Rodgers game for 33 points. That difference right there will often lead to a loss when your quarterback, puts up half the points as the opposing quarterback. And then on top of that, VJ has Dalvin Cook, and Hopkins finally started playing for him as well. VJ at 4-4, he's very similar to John. We talked about it in the power rankings episode as well. He's probably a little bit more meat on the bone for VJ's team, and I expect him to be even better moving forward. Finally, we get to John's matchup. John put up 187. He's rounding into form. Latavius Murray with a big effort, 36 points. Kenny Golladay, 28. Christian McCaffrey, 27. Really glad I didn't play John last week. I lost to Kenny, so really it doesn't matter who I play. But a tough luck loss for Tim and the Golden Geese because Drew Brees had 30 points, James Conner 24, and Diggs with 19. He had some real good performances, and 134 will often get you the win. Of all the teams that lost this week, Tim had the highest score, and he outscored two of the teams that were in the winner's circle. So, a tough luck loss for him, but he's still, he's 3-5. He's on the outside looking in, but he's certainly not in the crippling position I'm currently in, sitting there at 2-6. That said, here we're going to move to our next segment, the transaction review. And again, if you want to say anything, I think I do have the ability, I believe, to view comments that are sent in during the show. But yeah, maybe not. This is the first time, a little choppy. We'll keep going with it. Transaction review. We're going to have a little thing here I've been doing for my other fantasy league on our pod is the overpay of the week and the value of the week off of waivers. And it looks like for the overpay of the week this week, there's only one clear choice, and I'm sorry to make it to my former co-manager, John. Kareem Hunt for $34 is a lot of money. That's $34 out of a $100 budget. Kareem Hunt isn't eligible to return until week 10? I think he was suspended. It's either week 10 or week 11. But here's a player that Nick Chubb's just playing so well for them. I can't see Hunt being more than a bit piece for them, more than like a third down back. He's a fantastic player, but he also hasn't played in the league for almost a year now. It was around Thanksgiving last year that he got eliminated. Or no, he had eliminated. He got suspended for the domestic violence last year and that heinous video that came out. So he hasn't played, and we'll stick to the football on this. And it's tough. You see a lot of these players who they take a part of the season off for suspension or holdouts, and they're just not the same guys when they come back. Historically, I know Vincent Jackson was one of those guys. I think you've seen it a little bit, not so much with Zeke this year, but you're certainly seeing it with Melvin Gordon as well. And I don't think Kareem Hunt is that much more talented than a Melvin Gordon type. So for him to just be off this whole time, I think he was injured too while he was on the suspension list. And considering the way that Nick Chubb has played, I don't see a whole lot coming for him. And $34 it's a hefty sum to pay. And unfortunately for John, there weren't a whole lot of big money additions this week on the waivers. So a $34 addition is going to get you the overpay of the week. Value of the week, Wilt Ham snagged Jalen Samuels for $10. And earlier in the week, up until today, really, I didn't think that James Conner was going to miss this game. He has a strained AC joint or sprained AC joint, also known as a separated shoulder. And I'm not going to play the card of I've had this injury, but I have, and it is painful. It is something you can play through given treatment and the severity. So I was expecting Conner to come back, and I know Pro Football Doc on Twitter. He's a great follow. Really does a tremendous job evaluating the injuries through video, and obviously caveats it. He can't look at the MRIs or anything, but he was saying that most players will, most of these running backs can play through it with an injection, and we saw that with Josh Jacobs last week. He played through his separated shoulder, got an injection before the game. But I think what hurt Conner was it was a Monday Night Football game, so he had one less day to really get ready. And it also kind of helps that Jalen Samuels is a capable backup. And I think what they're going to do is sit out Conner for a week. I can't see him missing 2 weeks, but they're probably going to sit him out a week and then play him back when he's fully healthy next week. But that said, Will Tam's getting the guys in Jalen Samuels value of the week for $10, who's going to go out there and get full touches. Benny Snell is also out with a knee injury. So you get a running back getting all those touches, and he's going to get the receptions too in that Steelers offense. I think Jalen Samuels, especially in a PPR format, is going to get over that 20-point marker, and that's worth $10 every time. So there's your overpay of the week again to summarize: Kareem Hunt to John, and your value of the week, Will Tam, with a $10 addition for Jalen Samuels. Finally, jumping in here, we did have one trade that's actually going to process in about an hour now. It was myself and Will Tam. I traded away Julio Jones and Rashad Penny for Mike Evans and Robbie Anderson. And the initial offer sent over was Julio Jones and Devontae Parker for Mike Evans and Robbie Anderson. And Tam came back and countered for Rashad Penny. And the reason he did that was he's the Chris Carson owner. He's sitting there at 6-2 with a good chance of making the playoffs and wants to secure probably his best running back. He has Alvin Kamara, so maybe he's securing one of his top 2 running backs, which is very important to do, especially when you're this close to the playoff race. So he swapped them in. He gets Julio Jones too, who's on a bye week, but Julio's the best player in this deal. Mike Evans is a close second, but Julio, especially in a PPR, he's Evans has never been that 100 catch type player. Julio's almost guaranteed to get to 100 catches this year. So I would expect, Julio's definitely the higher upside player in this trade. And for Will Tam, he can afford to sit out the bye week. The reason I did the deal is I'm sitting here at 2-6, like I started the show with, and I needed a player this week. I need a win this week. And I was like, if I could trade Julio Jones for a slight downgrade, I started to filter, the top receivers in fantasy so far. And Tam kind of struck me as a team that, is towards the top end of the standings. Had a player in Mike Evans who was, a tier or half tier down from Julio Jones. And I was like, maybe I can get a Robbie Anderson, a player I like for one of my flex spots in this format as well, and upgrade from Devontae Parker. So in this case, it ends up being Rashad Penny, was also on my bench. So I get 2 players that can play in my lineup this week. Robbie Anderson's got a kick matchups coming up. I expect him to catch a little bit of fire here along with that Jets offense, and Le'Veon Bell too. So if I can get 2 players that can play right away for, Julio Jones, and I'm not downgrading by, this isn't an entire football field difference between Julio Jones and Mike Evans. There is a difference, but I'm not severely hurting my team in that respect. That's the reason I went out and did the deal. Certainly for anyone else out there, who's going to watch the podcast at some point or watching right now, if you want Odell Beckham Jr., I'm willing to trade him. I'm also willing to, I'm willing to pretty much listen to just about any deals, but especially when I come up on my bye weeks and I need to win, like I'll take some slight downgrades for players just to avoid having to play without some of my better players. I think that concludes our transaction review. We're going to start looking at this week's matchups right now, and we're going to wing it a little bit and bring up the scoreboard, talk about some of the players. I know we were doing a little betting against the line before earlier in some, I think it was episode 1 or 2. It's tough because owners are still making changes. I know my roster is probably not secured. My roster is not locked down yet, and I'm sure yours probably isn't as well. But I think it's a good thing to look forward at what we have going on this week, especially with the playoffs so close. And we'll even mention some of the Thursday night performances. I would start off with me, but I think it's a pretty boring matchup. So I'm going to go to what I think is one of the more interesting matchups of the week, and that's Crawford against VJ. Crawford is at 5-3, VJ 4-4. So these are 2 teams in the thick of the playoffs. Probably a more important win for VJ because he drops below 500 if he loses, whereas Crawford is, sitting, pretty decent at 5-3. The matchup took a little bit of a turn last night, though, as Emmanuel Sanders went off for 24 points. he had a monster game with Jimmy Garoppolo and playing against that Arizona defense, and gives Crawford a little bit more of a lead than he had going into this, which is, I'm sure Crawford's all over that. Again, it's a big matchup, so anything like that is certainly very helpful for him. And apologies, I'm trying to get in here, and the whole thing won't load. But great start nonetheless for Mike Crawford there. And we're going to preview the rest of the matchup as soon as the ESPN app decides to cooperate with us here. In the meantime, I'll cover. I'm going to be trying to. You probably saw me wearing the Buccaneers jersey last week, and then the Saints Reggie Bush the week before then. We brought out the Vikings Adrian Peterson this week. He, whether or not this is his final season, he's been a fantastic player in his career, Hall of Fame guy. And, I think the Vikings days, not that it's any not that it's really a hot take, but those are certainly his best years, and wanted to represent it on today's podcast. All right, here we go. We're in now. We're in this thing now. Looking at the matchup, we have right now, even after the Emmanuel Sanders blow up, they're projected about a 50-50 split here. Again, projections a little bit weak this early in the season. This early in the week. It's just they don't tend to really line up. It's really hard to project the amount of fantasy points and yards someone's going to get, but it's also good to know generally how you stack up against your opponent. VJ, though, he's just got some really high octane players with Dalvin Cook. Leonard Fournette's got an amazing matchup. Cook's against Kansas City, Fournette against Houston. Then he has Hopkins, Sutton, Hunter Henry, Dak Prescott. So it's a really good squad. But then on the flip side, Crawford's got a good no slouches himself. He's a Saquon owner. He's got Mark Ingram. Emmanuel Sanders went off. Golden Tate, Marvin Jones. Like I said, this is a middle of the standings type matchup. But if you're Crawford and you get a win, you could potentially be tied for the second place in a bye week with Will Tam, depending on how Will Tam's game goes. And again, if you're VJ, you're really trying to stay above 500. If I had to pick a team in this matchup, just looking at it, I'm going to lean Crawford. I think the start from Emmanuel Sanders is a real, boost to him. And while I like the Cook and Fournette matchups on VJ's side, I don't love Courtland Sutton with Brandon Allen, despite the great first name at quarterback. So I'm going to lean Mike Crawford in this matchup, and certainly is one that it's going to make a big difference in the standings if Crawford ends up winning this matchup. Next game, we have Will Travers teetering at 4-4 in the 7th seed in the standings against Mark the Melon of his number 1 8-0 squad. Right now, the projections have Will Travers winning 131-111. Wow. What's going on with the Melons team this week? Well, he doesn't really have any big buys. Well, no, he does. I stand corrected. He has Michael Thomas and Auden Tate on bye. That said, though, the drivers of his team, Patriots defense, Lamar Jackson's playing. He's got Travis Kelce out there. Aaron Jones plays the Chargers and their weak run defense. So I think he could really surprise. It was that Christian Kirk matchup against San Francisco last night that really took a hit to Mark the Melon's chances. But it's still hard to pick against him. Travers at 131. I mean, he's got some good players, but David Montgomery's got a bad matchup. Nick Chubb's against Denver. Denver's kind of falling apart, but still, Devontae Adams is expected back. That's big. DJ Chark's got a good matchup against Houston. So the receivers are really where Travers' matchups is looking pretty good. I think, on everything considered, I think I'm going Travers in this matchup. And not just because I don't like what Mark has going on. I think Aaron Jones is going to absolutely smash. He's going to make sure I look like more of a fool than I make myself look like on a daily basis. But what I don't like about Mark's team is he has Lamar Jackson and the Patriots defense going. It's kind of a conflicting interest. If the Patriots defense does great, Lamar Jackson does poorly, and vice versa. I think it really limits his upside this week. I'd like to see Mark, Look, I would play Jackson this week. I really would. But when you have the Patriots defense, I think it severely limits your upside, like I was saying. And I'd like to see Mark maybe stream someone else instead. But I guess you dance with the girl who took you to the dance, and that's what he's doing with Lamar Jackson. And yeah, we'll see how it works out. But yeah, I'm leaning Travers. I mean, it would be a huge win for him. He'd get to 5-4. Mark could go to 8-1 and still be the number one seed by at least a game. Could even maintain his 2-game lead if Tam loses. So it really isn't a big deal for Mark. But I'm leading Travers in this matchup, and because of that, wait for Mark to put up 200 this week. Sorry, Travers. Next game on the docket. This one's really, can Marco stay in the playoff race? He's 3-5. Will Tam sitting there at 6-2. Tam, he has Crawford biting at his heels. He's got, he might have a chance to pick up a game on Mark DeMelon. After the trade, he no longer has Mike Evans in his lineup, so that's going to be a little tough. We're looking at the projections right now with Evans in his lineup, so it's really hard to say. He's got Chris Carson in the tough matchup against Tampa Bay's top run defense. He's got Mark Andrews in that tough New England matchup, but he does have Jalen Samuels playing, like we highlighted earlier as the top pickup of the week. Look on the flip side, and you have Marco's sitting there, Deshaun Jackson in what I expect to be a high-scoring game in London against Jacksonville. He's starting Mark Walton. He's starting Damian Williams, who I cut last week, which I really don't like because Damian he only got into the game once LaShawn McCoy fumbled. And that's not to say, LaShawn McCoy might not be in the good graces of the team anymore after that fumble. But at the same token, I don't know if I would start him. Marco's also throwing out Chris Conley, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel. Look, Marco's team could do something. It really could, and it could blow up. But there's a lot of players like McLaurin, Conley, Samuel, Walton, and Damian Williams. The floor on these guys is scary low. And as a result, I'm going to take Tam here going to 7-2. And if Tam gets that win to 7-2 and Mark's looking weak, we could have Mark, only one game up in the number one seed race. But I'm sure Mark cares way more about the bye week than the number one seed to begin with. And the way we do payouts in this league, it's just first place and second place gets a little bit. I know we circulated that in the email earlier. But wow, there's definitely some interesting stuff going on. So far you see there's that VJ matchup against Crawford, and Crawford could climb up to 6 wins. Looks like Tam has a good chance to win, and then you look at with Mark potentially losing, you could have some shakeups here at the top and really bring the league back. Really condense that top part of the playoff race compared to what we're currently looking at. Well, I guess we'll get into my game. I'm not super thrilled about it. Last night was a little rough. George Kittle, despite the injury, went off for 19.9 points. He had a sick Gronkian type touchdown run. Matt Burrito was solid with 78 yards, ends up with 11.2 points. So Tim starts off with a 31-point start to his week. He currently has an empty spot in his lineup, although I expect him to go through and fix that. He also has James Conner out, so maybe I have a chance here. Empty spot in the lineup. If he doesn't check James Conner's out, he's starting AP against Buffalo. Wow. I'm really, I'm still probably going to pick him. Jameson Crowder against Miami. I like that matchup. Calvin Ridley's on bye. Mahomes might play. That's the interesting thing that just came through Friday. Today, it's a Friday. Of course, it's live. I don't know why I'm saying that. But Patrick Mahomes is now questionable. He's not doubtful anymore. So he could actually play this week. I don't expect it, but I think it's more of a sign that he's going to play next week. Still, though, could impact this matchup. But looking at his bench, he's got a lot of players who aren't going to play. He's got Pat Mahomes, that's one. Calvin Ridley, Josh Gordon, who I just got an alert on my phone that he got claimed. We don't know what team yet. I'll definitely update live when that comes in. But right now, it says he's been claimed off waivers. The team is waiting to inform the player that will be cut based on the corresponding move. So we don't know exactly which team yet. I'll do a quick live check for everyone. See if we do know it. Nothing's coming through. So, well, that's unfortunate. We'll let you guys know if we find out. Either way, that's three players we just rattled off that aren't going to play for Tim. So Brees, Ridley, Gordon, Mahomes. That's four. Five with James Conner. We only have a five-person bench. Mahomes is probably in his IR, so that's four of his six bench players are out. Man, it's gonna be a tough week for him. So he's probably gonna put Devin Singletary in his lineup. Then he's got two tight ends, Jimmy Graham and Dawson Knox. Doesn't look great for him. Against my squad, where I'll have Josh Allen going, the Jacobs Michelle combo, Odell Beckham, Mike Evans coming in to go with Kenny Stills, Evan Ingram. I hate that. I guess I got to double down on my team. Tim has too many injuries this week. Looks like I got him at the right time. We could end up with 2, 3, and 6 teams with myself and Tim. Maybe that puts me right back into it. I mean, it would be nice if that's the case. Oh, wow, this just happened. Seahawks claimed Patriots receiver Josh Gordon off waivers today. Wow, going to a playoff team. From a fantasy, we'll take a little detour here. From the fantasy perspective, really not the greatest news for DK Metcalf, who was getting a lot of run. He was getting, I think he was one of the top red zone target receivers. Josh Gordon will eat into that. Gordon will eat into his snaps in general. And I'm not the biggest Metcalf fan, but having Gordon there is just, I don't think it's great for Metcalf's value. It might help out Tyler Lockett a little bit, keep a little bit of intention off of him, but probably not. And the biggest impact is it's going to help out Russell Wilson. And anytime you bring in extra receiving targets, it helps out that running back and that running game. So wow, the big news coming through. Look at that live right here while we're talking about my matchup. The most interesting thing was what happens to Josh Gordon. Well, does Josh Gordon play this weekend? I don't know. That remains to be seen. Maybe Tim plays him. He might actually need him, which is interesting. But also for any teams out there, if you are interested in Josh Gordon and that Seattle offense, might not be a bad idea to throw Tim an offer because he needs players who can play right now, and he's certainly shorthanded and 3 and 5. So trade opportunity alert right there. I'm gonna, we'll wrap up this matchup saying I'm gonna lean myself here. I got to bet on my team. I'm getting Mike Evans in. I'm playing purely week to week at this point and throwing the kitchen sink at him, whereas Tim's got a lot of injuries, an empty spot in the lineup. Despite the good start for Tim right there from Kittle and Burrito, I'm confident my team can come back and make an effort there. I think that's all the matchups. Nope, we have John and Edwin, 2 4-4 teams, and 2 teams that I really think are going to end up in the playoffs, but one of them is going to be sitting there at 5 and 5, 4 and 5. And you know what? The more I'm looking at these matchups, the teams that I'm chasing in that bottom spot, one of John and Edwin's going to lose. One of Chris and Kenny is going to lose, just based on who's playing each other. VJ could lose to Mike Crawford. Travers getting the win over DeMello will be huge, but say DeMello pulls that off. I mean, yeah, 2 and 6, you're still in it, surprisingly. Usually, I know I'm in another league with divisions, and 2 and 6, depending on what division you're in, can be a total death sentence. But looks like I'm still in it. I'll take that. Not a terrible place to be. But here, this Edwin John matchup. Have I designated the matchup of the week? I don't think I have. I'm going to give it to this because I think both players deserve to be in the playoffs. Both are good owners who have done a really good job this year. Edwin, in particular, has been my most improved owner of the year. He used to be that Madden 11 guy who would just draft the old players that he knew, didn't really know any of the new players coming up. But now Edwin's a guy who, he listens to the Fantasy Footballers podcast, and credit to those guys. They're fantastic. Definitely helped my passion for trying this out myself. But he listened to them, and he's really had a good season because of it and picked up more of those surprise players as a result. So Edwin's sitting there 4 and 4. John Canellis 4 and 4. John's got McCaffrey. He's got Eckler, Keenan Allen. John also has an open tight end spot in his bench. Confident John will go in and do that, but at the same time, he's got a lot of bye weeks with AJ Green, who is injured as well, Jared Goff, and Latavius Murray. He doesn't really have anyone injured. With AJ Green on bye, you can't put him in his IR. So I don't know. Maybe John is playing without a tight end. I can't imagine he is. But with John's wife expecting soon, and maybe it already happened and we don't know about it. So John and Emma are expecting really soon, and fantasy football just isn't a priority over that, as it shouldn't be. So maybe he doesn't put a tight end in, but if assuming he does, it's going to be a tight matchup. Edwin's got Zeke against the Giants. Giants defense is terrible. I know their run defense has played a little bit better this year, but I still expect Zeke to just go wild against them. He's got Tyler Lockett against that leaky Tampa Bay defense. I could see this as like a 2 deep bomb Tyler Lockett type game. Darren Waller, he's matchup proof at this point, but he's in that high scoring game against Detroit. And, you got a little stack going on for Edwin with Derek Carr and Darren Waller. I'm going to lean Edwin in this matchup. I just think he's got a lot of good matchups going on. And one player I don't really love on John's team at the moment, and I like the player a lot, but his matchup, Marquise Brown, he's questionable this week, but he's going to play. But he's against New England, and he's the top receiver for Baltimore. I imagine he's going to get a lot of attention. I wouldn't be surprised, and this would be a little unique, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Stephon Gilmore covering Mark Andrews, the tight end, just because Andrews has been their number one receiving threat, and then having a combination of a corner and a safety over the top on Marquise Brown this week. You could even play like a Jonathan Jones with his speed at safety over the top on Brown, and then a Jason McCourty underneath. So I just think, Belichick's so good at scheming against the other opponent's top players that I'm not really in love with either Marquise Brown or Mark Andrews this week. I really think Belichick's going to find a way to scheme against them. But I'm leaning Edwin in this 4-4 matchup that's so important. So yeah, big game right there. A little bit less of a big game, although I got to give him respect, and I apologize, Kenny. I should have given myself the 12th seed instead of you. I deserved the last power ranking. Came out and beat me last week. He's got a better team than it looks like. He still has Joe Mixon on bye in his lineup. Oh, this is killing me, but I'm still giving you respect, Kenny. You deserve the win. You got it. But this week's matchup against Chris needs a win to stay alive. He's 2-6. Kenny's 3-5. So really, end of the day, do they both end up at 3-6? I don't know. Kenyon Drake was started by Chris McNamara for 28 points. That definitely helps. Chris is the favorite per the projections. He's got some good matchups here. He's got Stafford in that Oakland game that's supposed to be high scoring. He's got Le'Veon Bell against Miami, Allen Robinson against that weak Philly defense. Yeah, I've convinced myself. While Kenny has a good squad, those matchups are too good. Plus the Kenyon Drake game, I'm gonna have to lean Chris McNamara here, getting back in the thick of things at 3-6. And if you look at my squad based on some of my projections here, if I do manage to win against Tim and his beat up squad, I would be 3-6, and then that would make Kenny and Chris 3-6 as well. So that's 3 of 6 teams not in the playoffs at 3-6, and there's a bunch of 4-4 teams. So I could be a game out of the final wild card if I can win this week. So all is not lost. It was an unfortunate week for sure for me, but all is certainly not lost. We're going to go into our last segment here. We'll make it quick. Last episode was a little bit longer. This one will be a little bit shorter. We don't have any guests this week. But if you ever want to be a guest on the podcast, I love having them, and I look forward to it. We'll start off here with one of the season-long takes. I said, is it possible for Brandon or Chris to come back? Brandon being myself, a little third-person action. Yeah, of course. I think going through the matchup review there and how condensed this league is, 2-6 is not quite as rough a start as you might have, and as much as I initially thought. So, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that. I think it is possible. But a lot's going to have to happen. And it's funny because we always say, like, oh, it's possible if you win out. But, these are usually teams that, they're 2-6 for a reason. And there are some holes there. But I do think Chris and I could make a run, especially with the way this is looking and some of the matchups coming up here. What would really help is if Travers didn't beat Mark. But the way Mark's season's going, the way he's, pretty much living to end me this entire fantasy season. I heard a loud noise from the cats in the background there. I wouldn't be surprised if Mark's first loss comes in a situation where I could really use him getting a win. That's what I would expect. Edwin, I said, is he real? Is he fake? I mean, look, he had a tough breaks with Carrion and Antonio Brown, and now he's 4-4. He had a tough loss last week. I think Edwin's team is for real. I still think it's good. I'm projecting him to beat John and go 5-4. I think he's going to end up getting the playoffs. And hey, look, he had a rare sighting of one of our mascots. This is Peaches, the other cat. You saw Millie last week cause a ruckus, but this is Peaches making an appearance at the end of the cast here. Probably looking for some food since it's around 5 p.m. But yeah, I think Edwin's team is certainly real. And then finally, will Mark go undefeated? I don't think he does, but he certainly has. 8-0 gives you a semi-realistic chance. But this week it's looking a little bit rough, and I think Travers takes it this week and ends the undefeated talk. And the Patriots' schedule gets a little worse here going forward. They have a bye week, and then Mark's going to lose a little bit there from his defense. They're not going to be quite the juggernaut they have been in terms of scoring touchdowns. I still think Mark gets one of those bye weeks, and once you get that bye week in the playoffs, you're extremely dangerous. But I do think that there are a couple of teams here, John in particular and VJ, who have stronger teams than their 4-4 record shows. John is 4-4. Then their 4-4 record shows, and I think that will reflect itself over the course of the season. Well, that's going to end our first live YouTube. I like this. I enjoyed it. I think maybe in these future episodes, I'm going to do more of the live going forward. But thanks for being here. I'm your commissioner and your host, Brandon DeFreitas. We'll be here next week. Hopefully a Wednesday show. I know we said that last week, but we still have a couple of slow Fridays here and taking advantage of them. But hopefully next week we're back on the Wednesday train, and we'll have some more playoff scenarios to talk about, and hopefully I'll be talking to you as a 3-6 team, and hopefully Mark will be sitting there at 8-1. Well, thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next week.